Hi, I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and we couldn't be happier to host the 4th annual Insight Jam. I want to thank everyone who's participating this week, as well as our Insight Jam sponsors, DataStax, Monte Carlo, Denodo, High Gear, and Seller Data. I also want to thank our Solutions Review editors and staff for pulling this event together. When we started this in 2019, we wanted to take a moment at the end of the year to celebrate enterprise technology with a social media event offering best practices and predictions. This will be our biggest jam ever, including 16 live-streamed expert panel discussions over 4 days. And we intend to keep the insights flowing in 2023 with the launch of an expert subscription site for any tech professional who wants to publish posts on Solutions Review. Again, thank you all for being here and enjoy the Insight Jam.
Solutions Review presents Insight Jam, a social media celebration of enterprise technology. Hello and welcome back to the third day of the Insight Jam. I'm Jonathan Paula, the Director of Multimedia here at Solutions Review, and today's focus has been on work tech, and we're continuing our discussions today with another lineup of experts to talk about Industry 4.0, charting the future of industrial automation. We have an esteemed group joining me from around the continent and globe. I'm going to bring them in now and let them introduce themselves. Kenny, you've graciously agreed to moderate. So we'll start the introductions with you. 60 seconds or so. Tell us about your background and what excites you today to discuss this.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yes, I'm Kenny Mulliken, and I'm CIO of Paragon Films, a plastics manufacturing company. And I'm also an analyst for Acceleration Economy, where I cover topics such as Industry 4.0 and automation and other similar topics from the perspective of a manufacturing CIO.
I'm Arjun Chunder. Good to meet all of you. The CEO of Industrial ML. We're a company that has built an enterprise software platform that has navigation, real-time communication, and reporting modules to help with information flow in factories, and in particular, help new workers be able to get trained better, cheaper, and faster. My career background is in manufacturing. I've worked in operations. I've worked on the product design side in both big corporate and in startups. And this is the first company that I founded.
Alexis?
Yep. Hello everyone. So I'm Alexis Chavalot, CEO of Capto. So I've been working in automation for now a bit more than 5 years, and across different industries. But founded Capto now almost 2 years ago, and we had quite a lot of interesting development on the supply chain aspects, and I will be very happy and honored today to be with you to share a bit on that experience.
Hey everyone, my name is Edmund Zagarin, founder and CEO of Orchestration. My background is in the intersection of data science and procurement and supply chain. So looking at business processes that allow different companies to communicate with each other around price, inventory, part number, SKU number, that sort of thing. And I'm excited for the conversation.
And Sasha.
Hey everybody, my name's Sasha. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at NowVertical. My background is quite eclectic and varied. Spent about 13 years in the kind of marketing services space and acquiring and integrating different technology companies that were servicing enterprise. Spent a couple of years in hardware and software around quantum computing and advanced FPGA and ASIC design, as well as advanced application design, leveraging some of the more cutting edge forms of computation. And then been working in the data analytics space here with NowVertical. We're a data analytics services and technology company. So we service about a couple hundred customers around the world across a wide variety of data engineering, MLOps, data science, and technology applications. Great to be with everyone.
Thanks. And Ricardo.
Hey, everybody. Ricardo Kraft, EVP of Product Management with Nexium, with the company a little over 3 years. My background has always been working in large technology organizations, and we solve the automation problem of basically inbound documents, purchase orders, AP invoices, order acknowledgements between buyers and suppliers, and helping automate that process a little bit more, so there isn't as much manual data entry and keystrokes. So we can talk a little bit more about that as we get into it. Looking forward to being here today. Thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, so we've got a good group of experts here today with a variety of perspectives. This looks to be a very exciting conversation. So as you know, we are talking about Industry 4.0. And, and from a general perspective, we all think of that as the fourth industrial revolution, specifically often manufacturing, but automating processes in order to be more efficient. And so often throughout time, that has meant eliminating the human element or removing human workers in order to replace them with robots, whether those are physical robots or software robots. Now we start hearing more and more talk about an Industry 5.0. And so that's where we want to start today, is how has automation affected the rise of Industry 4.0 and then set the stage for Industry 5.0? And along those lines, you might also talk about what is your perspective of Industry 5.0 or how would it differ from 4.0? The one that I would throw out there is that Industry 5.0 attempts to bring humans back into the mix, whereas Industry 4.0 may have been focusing on making things more efficient by being as cyber as possible. Now we realize we still need people. How do we make use of those people and coexist alongside these bots that we've put in place? Let's kick things off, starting with you, Alexi.
Yeah, thank you. So I think on that aspect, definitely the help of automation facilitates actually the growth of Industry 4.0, but leading to Industry 5.0. Why? Because I think more and more of like leaders had not only the time on the vision to actually grow their business, but what was the impact of their business on a broader aspect, following automation, on the impact on the society. And so from this facilitation, I actually now see this growth of the industry in that broader aspect, even in the technology, on the way they see technology. So they don't only onboard technology anymore, from what we are seeing, not only anymore for replacing the people or trying to actually grow their business, but also like how they enable the human in their team to actually do more and more of like creativity and grow their business, but themselves as well through this automation.
Sure. So focusing on helping humans do their own job better, or using humans for the things that humans are better at, and using the technology for things that technology can do as well or better. Anyone else want to weigh in on that? Who wants to go next?
Yeah, I could jump in. I think we saw something. What we hear oftentimes from our customers is, it's not that I necessarily want to use technology to take cost out of the business or that I want to automate a process for efficiency reasons, but it's really so that I can up-level the skills of the people that are in the organization to do higher value tasks. So the use case, again, that we solve is order entry. So somebody gets a PDF via email and they have to key punch it into an old legacy ERP system. So to the extent that we can automate that, and now that individual is focused on either reskilling or up-leveling their skills, relearning, new technologies, and or engaging with customers. Those are the things that we hear from our customers, to be able to evolve their workforce, taking advantage of some of the benefits of technology and automation.
Yeah, absolutely. I can jump in as well. One of the things that I've noticed heavily in the manufacturing space, especially, is no matter how much automation you put in place, you can't fully take away the reliance on human intuition to make critical thinking decisions. But there is a new paradigm with say millennials and Gen Zers, where they transition between jobs every 3 to 5 years. I think Deloitte actually did a study in about a year ago where it was about 2.8 years for people ages 25 to 34, but almost 10 years for people in the 55 to 64 demographic. So when you're dealing with a much more transient workforce, one of the key challenges for, I guess, industrial automation in the future is accepting that humans are important to the work process, but making it easier for people who are relatively new to the job and who are likely to leave the job soon to still be able to contribute meaningfully to the process. So that, human cyber interface is especially important. Um, to be able to enable more people to get in. It's not just about upskilling. I think Ricardo's right, but it's also about skilling and reskilling quickly.
I mean, my sense is that it's a bit of a false comparison, right? Human versus machine. And I think that if you look at 4.0 as this distributed narrow tasks of applications operating independent of one another, and you think about the value that humans bring in as a part of a process naturally, I think that the computational workload of a human brain far exceeds anything that we can even conceive of currently. And even with the kind of generalized approach to artificial intelligence that we're seeing now with NLP or image classification or recognition, it's still a very brittle and flawed process. So what's really exciting, though, is that when you have all these distributed lines of data that are being generated across an enterprise, when you think about 5.0 and you think about the connectivity between all these different sources, it becomes incredibly powerful to start to draw upon those innovations and connections that enable you to grow outside of the unit economics of efficiency or optimization that you get in 4.0. So I think that there's a huge leap that organizations need to take going forward in the ways in which that they conceive of automation and the connectivity of automation to enable them to grow in new and different ways.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think there's a great example of this right now with the release of ChatGPT. If any of you have seen this, it's really kind of unbelievable. The CEO of Box just posted a ChatGPT where he asked the AI to write a marketing strategy. And the AI did a pretty darn good job. And so I think when I think about Industry 4.0, I think about robotic process automation and the configuration of workflows that, again, used to require human data entry or rekeying of data, or even tasks related to data cleansing or labeling or organization. And I think what we're seeing now is just the capabilities that we can leverage in some of these new large language models and really just predictive models in general is really kind of far exceeds what I think a lot of people thought where we would be at in 2022.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of these ways that we are able to use the technology to either bolster the work that we get from humans or help humans to do their job better or prepare these humans, what kind of tools and technologies specifically are you seeing that are most important to have in your stack when you start working with automation of this kind? What are some of those tools that you're either using or that you've heard of or seen that would be really valuable like that? You just mentioned ChatGPT. Edmund, did you have any others that you could call out?
I think that in terms of the capabilities that companies are really looking at, I like to sort them into capabilities that involve process, capabilities that involve data, and capabilities that involve orchestration. And the orchestration capabilities are really about bringing data from disparate systems together, comparing them against some model, which can either be a static model or a persistent simulation, and then using that to really gain a sense of, okay, if I have a process that's running, how well is that process performing? Is it better than the model? Is it worse than the model? And also, like, what updates do I need to make so that I can understand how good at scale processes that are being done either in a fully automated or human directed fashion are performing, and then really have continuous improvement baked into that. And then I think you're also seeing companies are buying a lot of external data. People have had issues, especially in the industrial and manufacturing area, with data quality for years. And I think people are just not really willing to wait anymore. And so people are buying data at a scale you haven't seen. And then you go into the enterprise resource planning, or MRP technology stack, and that's still really important too. And I think you're seeing a lot of these companies are adding connectors, adding open APIs, adding ways for other kind of partners in the ecosystem to get data out of these systems of record, draw insights from them, and then very quickly convert that into some form of business value. Either it's a faster process or a more performant one.
I mean, my sense is also that it depends on the type of industry or the vertical in which you operate in, and then obviously the types of applications that you're trying to develop or data you're trying to leverage. I mean, the kind of ubiquitous kind of requirements around data governance, data security, data mobilization, I think those foundational technologies are readily available. The degree to which that enterprises are kind of deploying them across their entire kind of data footprint is still limited in our view and in our experience. And that's a big issue, right? Because it's even when you're dealing with something very simple as like, cloud migration of data to be more contemporary in the way in which that you manage your enterprise, the costs associated with doing that are incredible. And if you don't have a good perspective on what data you have or what's valuable, the unit economics of all of these deployments break down really quickly, which is why I think the manufacturing vertical has seen such positive returns based on the automations that they've been able to deliver because of the efficiencies that they've been able to generate. But it becomes a lot more gray as soon as you start to move out into kind of the more human-oriented aspects of a company. So it's whether you're on the full modern data stack with 50,000 connectors and all kinds of data, the unit economics need to pay out. And I think we're going to see a lot of pressure in 2023 to go, am I actually extracting value from my data, my processes, and my technologies?
Yeah, foundationally, do you have the right level of compute in place, right? So elastic compute, so that you can match whatever your capacity requirements are, as opposed to step change matching of capacity to what you need to do. But then on top of that, now you're starting to mix in, okay, what are the end user applications? And from an end user perspective, it kind of goes back to, what are the usability improvements so that you're removing friction from the interaction model with the user? Again, going back to the use case that we solve, if we're helping somebody enter an order or not touch something, we're looking at minutes and seconds of how much time we're taking out of that process. And so, usability of applications on top of elastic compute, and then, as somebody else mentioned already, but then what are all the integrations? So what's that robust integration layer that you need to have in place? And then I think the last component is what are you doing from an ML perspective, and where is ML, machine learning? The ChatGPT it's amazing, right? And so to the extent that you're identifying specific use cases where ML can really move the needle a little bit and start to take some of the human interaction out, going back to kind of what I mentioned before, those are the components that we think about from an application stack perspective, and they all deserve equal footing, right? You can't over-index on any single one. They all need to work in unison, which is always the interesting balancing effort.
I would add that from what was said, that actually there is two other aspects, because we are talking about cost, about the technologies, etc. But there is also, I think, also the way the technology is actually onboarded. I think in the years to come, there is a huge development that we are seeing in the no-code solutions that are very easy to implement, and that can have like a quick impact for some of the industries that are late on the process to use their data, to have actually to value their data, as we are saying. But also like the open source aspect, there is a huge development there, and I think it's also like part of what we were talking in the previous question, which is Industry 5.0, and as like a more community approach, and where the technology is used and deployed in different ways than before. And there is this aspect that I think as a shift in the technology. So going for two different extreme tools that are like very easy to onboard, and others that are very technical, but actually that can have like a quick and huge impact and drastically reduce the cost of onboarding those technologies.
Yeah, and I guess what I'll add to the conversation, it actually relates back to what Edmund was saying at the top, where one of the ways that you break down a tech stack would be the orchestration layer. And in this paradigm where we're trying to bring humans back into the process of basically being a part of the ecosystem of industrial automation, there's a whole set of tools around data governance and analytics and use of machine learning, all of those things. But just to kind of close the loop on all of that, the ability to put the resultant information into the hands, brains, ears, whatever, of the people who can most act upon that information in real time is a really critical part of completing your tech stack over the next 10 years or so. Because ultimately information is not all that helpful unless people can see and react to that information at the time that it is relevant. And I think one of the limitations, especially in manufacturing, of gathering big data has been that it's been relatively confined to the data scientist or manufacturing engineer class of employees and hasn't necessarily filtered down to the production floor. But I think over the course of the next 10 years, the technologies that bring that information to the production floor are going to be much, much more important.
Good points. Good points. So as CIO of a manufacturing company, I tend to usually focus on Industry 4.0 from the perspective of manufacturing processes. But as I've looked into the different technologies that are available out there that would benefit me or my company, things like digital twins, things like Internet of Things networks, IoT, I find that there are some really fascinating use cases for Industry 4.0 that go outside of manufacturing, such as anything from smart buildings like an office building to arenas, sports arenas, or even whole cities, smart cities. What kind of use cases for Industry 4.0 are you seeing, and where might we start to see even more with Industry 5.0 take its place outside of the manufacturing industry?
I would say that adding up to the question before as well is that like it all depends also on the interaction between the people, as we were saying, having humans more in the center with Industry 5.0, and with the technologies that are being onboarded for smart cities, for smart factories, and smart buildings, is the way that people will interact with those technologies. And IoT has a big play on that. But I think there is also a discrepancy at the moment between what IoT can do and is doing on some like factories that have very connected machineries and are able to really have a lot of insights and a lot of interaction, and actually the end interaction with the human that are not yet at the full capacity that the technology can do today. And that today is, I think, the big development that needs to happen to bring to that next level for that 5.0. That's my point of view.
Well, and yeah, if you think of, say, ARVR as an example, it's obviously a very interesting tool to use in manufacturing, primarily to aid with worker training. If say they're being asked to assemble a new product or something like that. But ultimately, augmented reality or virtual reality apply to any scenario where you might end up wanting to explain to somebody how to perform a task. And manufacturing adjacent would be any type of field service for a product, obviously. But hey, I mean, even if you were to say venture into the sports realm and you want to help somebody learn how to perform a specific set of actions to improve their jump shot in basketball, for instance, that type of technology applies to all of that too. And I mean, you can see a lot of organizations who are looking to get that like tiny little edge, take on they're, take on these types of technologies that may have been developed for manufacturing and then, adopting it to their own industries.
Yeah, that's true. Anytime you start talking about automation, like Ricardo's example that he's brought up, it's going to apply to anybody, not just manufacturing. Anyone can take advantage of these sorts of automation that helps people do their job more quickly or more easily. Anyone else want to chime in on that one?
I mean, I would just make sure that we're identifying the difference between what's available from a data perspective and what's useful. I think there's a tendency you see in enterprise, especially people that are more data science oriented, wanting to gather more and more information and data into single sources of truth, which is understand that inclination, but that doesn't always benefit the outcomes that you're looking for. And I think we have to be very mindful of realistically, like what can we automate, like what tasks can we automate, and then in the ambiguities of the models in which that we develop, what insight can we derive from that to better understand the actual, whether it's the mechanics of a jump shot, whether it's the traffic patterns in a city. These are massively computationally intensive tasks for computers in which to do, which have huge externalities that often get not discussed, which I think 5.0 is trying to deal with, where they're looking at the ways in which that those externalities are factored into the way in which that we think about the industries in which that we kind of own and operate. So, I personally think sampling is going to be really incredibly important in the future. So understanding to not have to build kind of these comprehensive models that take into account all data sources and being able to sample really efficiently and effectively, I think that will be super helpful in terms of moving things forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. I'd say, you talk about sports, jump shots, and some of these other things, smart buildings. I'm going to take it back to procurement just for a sec, because that's something I know a lot of business owners. I mean, look, it's something we all have to figure out how to pay our suppliers. We all have to figure out how to get the right supplier at the best price that we can. And that is a huge bottom line impact on the business. And whatever you're doing with, whether it's manufacturing or it's something else, we're going into a recession, and a lot of people say that's there's something going on with the economy that seems to be deepening. And I think the ability of people to use some of these technologies to really just kind of create, not just reduce the risk associated with the cost of just operating a business, but also create some buffer and potentially even create some growth opportunities from the procurement organization. I think it's really powerful when you can link a technology to a really fast return on investment, a business case, something that any person, regardless of their curiosity about how these data models work or how impactful they are, can kind of grok and get behind pretty quickly. I just think that's really powerful.
Good. So kind of what I think I heard Sasha and Edmund both saying is it's not about technology for the sake of technology or because you have it or can do it, but what business problem are you trying to solve, which ultimately always does come back to people. What people are you trying to help? How do you want to help them? And what are the technologies available that we can put together in a new way or in a way that has been made possible? One thing that I've been extremely excited about is the fact that so many of these technologies are being made more accessible. So some of these technologies are not new. There have been companies that have been using them for a long time, but they weren't really accessible to the small to medium-sized companies. They required a very large investment. They probably required, as several people have mentioned, data scientists. Not every company has data scientists on staff or people that can think about machine learning in a way to, I'm going to build a model and I've got the tools and the know-how to actually make something useful. And so in as much as companies can provide tools which make that more easy or more accessible to you, to the person who has expertise, but not that kind of technical expertise. If they can take the Alexa, the Siri, the AI that is easy to use and make that possible.
Yeah, and I think a couple examples, like when you think about integration frameworks or tooling for a task that used to be maybe developer focused, and democratizing that through a low code, no code. And then all of a sudden it also goes back to measurement, right? So if I had a business process and I built an application and, you know, internally it saves somebody's time, but now if I've democratized the process, and you can have two people looking at a business problem inside your four walls and outside your four walls, and you've reduced the overarching cycle time between buyer, customer, supplier, vendor, you're kind of very quickly getting to the answer, as opposed to, well, give me your requirements, let me hand it off to a developer, let me give it back to you, see if it, just removing the friction through usability improvements and low code, and making, you know, some of the things that we're working on is how do you, you know, build embedded logic statements into a very simple interface so that you can understand how you would take an inbound document and turn it into an order. Those types of things don't have a straight line measurement in terms of what it does for our people or our customers, but it really reduces the friction in terms of that interaction model to be able to help somebody attain the business benefit that we're looking for. So another way is just, how do you democratize that, and what are the right measures? Are we looking at it the right way in terms of the business case?
Yeah, and once you've done that for somebody in your organization, doesn't it kind of become organic or even viral? Yeah. Then somebody else sees that, and then they think, oh, how could I take advantage of that? Even something as simple as analytics. We rolled out Power BI some time ago, and it was incremental how fast it ramped up to other people in other departments that said, oh, I could do that too. I could do that too. And soon we had analyses and visualizations being done that we never would have thought of, because it was the people who had been empowered to do that within their own department rather than relying on technical specialists to do it for them.
I think it's a bit of what was saying Sasha earlier, like finding the first use case is actually the one that is hard and to show the value of it to the teams. But the ones you have found, like the first use case, then it's really like indeed it's spread really fast, and we are seeing that really in every case as well.
Well, as much as I like Kenny, you trying to get rid of half of my business by saying service experts are no longer relevant with no code and low code applications. I think that in reality, I think the modern enterprise is going through this transformation of infrastructure and data management and governance that requires hands-on expertise with regards to how these narrow applications all start to come together and better inform the way in which your organization operates. And one of the important things in this that we ask ourselves, and when we're going through and trying to evaluate the performance of one of our clients as it relates to the data in which that they're producing and what that reflects in terms of their core operations, is what gets represented in data is what is, not necessarily what ought to be. So I think that as you start to orchestrate all these different narrow applications into a comprehensive view of what your company operates like, then you can start to challenge those assumptions and go, okay, so what is what we're doing appropriate, or are we generating the best returns for our investment? And I think those types of questions that come as a derivation of the work that we all do is incredibly powerful. And it's shocking sometimes when you're like, oh, that's what my company looks like. That's the way in which that team is performing. And it's incredibly empowering at times, and it's slightly depressing at others.
Yeah, just like any profession, there's always going to be a need for the experts, but there is a limited supply of them. And especially right now, as the need for what we're trying to accomplish is getting greater and greater. Sometimes even when you want to have professionals who can come in and do those projects for you, they can be in very short supply. And so having shortcuts, at least to get started, is really what I'm shooting for. Being a technology professional myself, I certainly don't want to get rid of our own, eliminate the need for our jobs.
The pool's warm over here, Kenny. Don't worry.
Something that we're seeing, a kind of a common theme I'm hearing here is that we have to start somewhere. That first one is difficult, and also one of the things that we see is somebody has to start. And Industry 4.0 was a way that manufacturing companies could lead in some cases with the expenditure of billions of dollars to establish some of these. And over time, that is then allowed to trickle down as those technologies are developed for the big use cases, for the NASA, for sending rockets into space, whatever it might be. Then eventually it works its way down. So, with regard to Industry 4.0, can you guys talk a little bit about how that has evolved in terms of what are the takeaways that Industry 4.0 gave us? How do we then apply that into Industry 5.0, or where we go from here? And, is it, like I mentioned, is this something that is helping to bridge the gap between larger companies and smaller companies as we kind of take this journey of evolution of industry?
I think it definitely does. And it almost reverse what we are seeing is almost reversing the logic. So it's not verified yet. I think it's a trend that is happening in the industry. But the smaller player, from what we are seeing just before, with the democratization of the technologies, from the aspect that it's no code, low code, or because of the aspect of cost, because sometimes it's just that it's not about being easy to onboard, but actually in terms of price, how you can access it on open source, for example, as I was saying previously, helps to really cut those costs. And that actually, from what I am seeing, enables small players that are more inclined on taking risk, taking onboarding technologies than bigger player before, and actually reverse the logic. So small SMEs actually now are taking ahead some technologies to onboard them, and it's completely reverse the logic of the industry. That's from what we are seeing.
Cool.
Yeah, I definitely say that there's an opportunity for players to gain a competitive advantage with some of these technologies, especially the ones that can be used and put in place pretty quickly and at a very minimal cost. I'll give you one example. There's a bunch of new car companies that are making EVs out there, and there's been a kind of a scramble for microchips, especially during the supply chain crunch over COVID. Now, if you use a traditional methodology for approving purchase orders in your procurement shop, it might be very difficult to change the speed at which you can approve. And so some of these new players have been able to swoop in and actually buy a bunch of these microchips just by being a little bit more agile in the way that they think about their processes. And yeah, it's enabled by machine learning that can go ahead and say, hey, this is the right price for the part number. We're going to match it across and orchestrate that cycle of going from a requisition or a bill of materials to a purchase order or a contract. But at the end of the day, that's the companies themselves just being able to come with a new mentality and put the and put the technologies to work, solving kind of a pressing business problem that's relevant to the C-suite. So I think you are going to see more smaller players put these technologies into practice. Again, it might not be holistic, everything at once, but if you can find a starting place and get from an insight to an action pretty quickly, that then I think does what some of the other folks here have talked about, of just creating that virtuous cycle of people being inspired by this technology and to use it in more different areas.
Yeah, I think some of the things that we've seen is, to the extent that your technology is actually going to help you retain your customers as much as it is, there's a lot of marketing technologies and focus on net new revenue, but it's really expensive to acquire a new customer versus retaining. And so to the extent that you can think about, error reduction, if you send out an invoice and it doesn't match the receivables, and you're late on that payment and you miss that vendor discount, that has an immediate impact. Or you keep punching order in and you send out a truckload of materials to the wrong customer, that has a massive impact. So to the extent that we try to help customers think about retaining that customer and then delivering higher quality of service, even to the point where how you deliver that order is that much faster than your competitor. And those are the areas where you're starting to compete. And that's something that a small company can really focus on. relative to bigger players. And so, that may help guide some of the decisions that they're going to make in terms of the technologies and some of those investments that they're going to make. Right? So.
I have a slightly different perspective, but I agree with everybody about the potential for the democratization of technology. But that hasn't necessarily taken effect in practice to the degree that it's promised to. So I actually did a study about 3 years ago, so it's a little bit outdated, but one of the pieces of data that I found during that study was that about 77% of manufacturers in the U.S. as of the middle of 2018 didn't have any kind of IoT implementation plan at all, right? And I think that, certainly Industry 4.0 has made data acquisition cheaper. It's made data processing cheaper. It's made communication of information cheaper. But there is still, I think, while perhaps a slightly less capital expenditure to be able to implement these technologies in smaller companies, there is still a lack of subject matter expertise to know how to use the technologies, know how to leverage them to help your business. And I think that goes back to the point we were making at the very beginning of this conversation, where being able to put that information into the hands of people who can act on it right away is really, really important. And there's still a lot of work to be done to really be able to make that information accessible to SMEs in a way that larger companies are able to leverage to a much greater extent. That being said, one approach that has been fairly common in product design over the last 20 years is something called reverse innovation, where you are specifically designing something for an emerging market or for a smaller market, and then potentially applying that to a larger market as opposed to the other way around. I think that there is certainly a trickle-down effect and a democratization effect of technology, but I think that people who design technologies for the more difficult companies or for SMEs specifically, there is some untapped potential in going about that technology adoption process and then moving it ahead to larger companies that I see as very fertile ground for future technology development.
Great. So a couple of themes I heard emerging as far as lessons learned was, one, it sounds like no matter how easy they make or accessible they make this, we're going to need experts. We're still going to need expertise. And in so much as it may not be easy to have those in-house, we need companies and partners who are experienced in using it in the way that you need to for your company. So if you're in manufacturing, finding a partner that knows manufacturing automation or can help with the kind of things that you need to do could probably still keep the cost down greatly from just saying, we're going to go try to figure this out and learn it and put it into place. I always advocate for finding experts that have experience in your area to do that. And then somebody else, Ricardo, you mentioned keeping your customers. And that is something that I've also thought a lot about, is the brand promise that your company has certain things tied to that. And part of that it should be delivering quality products to your customers, delivering products on time and quickly to your customers. And so in manufacturing, one of the ways that I think Industry 4.0 has a lot of potential, and again, most companies haven't gotten there yet, but it is available, is using IoT for sensors to work with the quality in real time. So rather than having to stop every 2 hours, every 4 hours, or a few times a day and sample the product and see if it's looking like things are working okay, instead, by the ability of connecting these sensors to AI, you can examine the quality as it comes off the line and hopefully then eliminate or at least greatly reduce the chance that you're going to send a flawed product out to the customer. Because if they've already waited this extended length of time that's happening in the supply chain, it takes them forever to get their product. They're really going to be unhappy if once they get it, it doesn't live up to their expectations and they have to send it back and wait for the supply chain again to get it to them again. So anything that you can do to automate the processes that it takes to to examine quality in real time. Seems like that could be viable to a lot of different industries.
Totally agree.
All right, to shift gears just a little bit, all of us here have been talking about what we can do, what has been done, what are we seeing. Let's put on our futurist hats and talk about where things are headed. What do you see that is either already being done that is making new things possible, or that maybe hasn't been done, but there's been experiments in it? You've done a little bit of research into it, or of somebody that did something that it hasn't been commonly done yet, but it's coming down the pipe, maybe within the next year, the next 5 years. How's the continued development of these solutions going to affect the way that companies operate? It seems like there should be a lot that we can mine in that.
I'm happy to get started.
Sure.
So I think that there's going to be some. I think we need to be. I feel like such a pragmatist here. We have to be mindful or cognizant of what the stage of machine learning, deep learning, artificial intelligence, like where we are currently and what it can do. And I think it's it's mesmerizing to see things like the chat models that are being developed and deployed. But I think when you dig past the surface there, you realize just how, again, computationally expensive that is and the cost associated with it. So what's really exciting, I think, on the horizon is the amount of innovation that's happening on the hardware side of things, to be able to innovate the way in which that you deal with these models in terms of distributed compute on the edge, or being able to tackle some of the more brittle facets of models that are being used in early stages of autonomous vehicle testing. There's a huge advancements that are happening on the hardware side of things, which is only going to empower the enterprises that are procuring that hardware, and the software layers that are going to be ultimately deployed on top of that. And so we have to just be mindful that the state of affairs today is still, in spite of it being incredibly inspiring, it doesn't really work when you try to apply it in a commercial context all the time, which is kind of part of the criteria of trying to consult or work with enterprise customers or develop products that service enterprise customers, is that's where a lot of the rubber meets the road, pardon the pun. So I think that there's all these brilliant advances we're going to see in the hardware side of things, but not to be overly kind of plugging our organization, but the vertical applications of artificial intelligence are ultimately what matter. It's not these generalized models that are based on natural language processing or image classification. It's the vertically intelligent applications that are going to ultimately enable enterprise customers to generate tons of value off of their data. And I mean, I guess not to be just don't be cheap if you're an enterprise. Like, this stuff is like hugely powerful, right? This is hugely powerful, and this can unlock wonderful, wonderful applications and value for you if you apply it in the right kind of way. And so optimistic and excited about the future in spite of the prognostications of the economy melting down next year.
Yeah, and I think talking about general capabilities, right? Especially from an ML perspective, the generally available open source tools that are available are now available. You can get them from the big technology providers. But to your point, understanding how it can solve a very specific use case is going to be probably where you start to see the application of those tools really drill down and delivering massive value, and having the expertise or being able to, we talked about low code, no code tools, taking the information that's in somebody's head that isn't a developer to be able to apply it to that specific use case. I think we'll continue to see that pattern evolve more and more over time. I think the other thing will be what breaks technologies is always the edge cases or what about this, the random use cases that don't happen very frequently. So to the extent that enterprises can really start to identify what's the 20% that's going to drive the 80%, is going to make the application of those tools even much more valuable. So getting rid of the complexity, simplifying, and then really finding the right hammer for the nail is I think we'll continue to see advancements.
Yeah, and I'll back up both Sasha and Ricardo on this. And I think there are a couple of trends that are leading to the perception that there is going to be more vertically integrated, use of artificial intelligence. Obviously, the retirements of people and the need to take all of their acquired expertise of the last 50 years and digitize it for new workers. And just the general sense that is going to creep into manufacturing, that technology has become more democratized, but they're not leveraging it to the degree that they can. I've already seen evidence of more and more industries at least trying to dip their toes into the water, hire their first software engineers, hire their first data scientists to try to take advantage of this thing that they know is valuable, but they haven't been able to up till now. And the more that begins to happen, the more you're going to see that people who, were trained and work on these types of, technology or algorithm, development tasks are going to learn how to become experts in that for a particular industrial vertical. And I think that desire for manufacturers, that trend in workforces is going to drive that type of vertical integration to a much greater degree than it has in the past.
Yeah, I agree with that and what's been said. I would say, just to crystallize it from my point of view, I have 5 predictions that I'd throw out there, none of which I think are particularly bold, but I think they frame up what we're going to see over the next few years. One, I think compute is going to continue to get cheaper, and it will become more ubiquitous. And in some cases, that means doing work on the edge, and I think it'll become accessible to places where it's been a little bit hard to get compute or to put it to work. Second, I think the number of part numbers and SKUs that companies have to manage is going to dramatically increase, especially as many industries go through their own transformations. You can think about what's happening in the automotive industry with EVs. There are versions of that happening in many industries simultaneously. Third, I think you're going to see more relationships that are structured as ongoing services rather than as one-time transactions. And I think in the supply chain, you're going to see more consolidation as you have kind of networks and partnerships and ecosystems of groups that team up and create these more solution-oriented or embedded experiences. 4, I think it's going to get harder to hire people. It's already pretty hard. I think it's going to get even harder. And that's in part because the skills that are being demanded are changing and people are going through their own evolutions to learn. But I also think it's that it's actually just a challenge to compensate people and internally from a management standpoint to say, hey, if we're going to get the people we want, it has to be compensated at this level. Whereas maybe before, these roles were compensated at just a very different level, and to make it all work on the balance sheet. And then 5th, I think you're going to see more and more the rise of these dedicated internal data ops and analytics groups that are perceived as mission critical. And it's not more kind of these, hey, let's get a dashboard that could be helpful for reporting or tracking. But I think it's more to say, hey, this is a critical way that we do business, and we need this embedded in our processes and to be regularly kind of truing ourselves up against that model.
Hi, all. Great discussion so far.
Just going back to something that Sasha said at the beginning, I think it is true that we can't always just focus on these great big new things that are coming. And that's one of the things I always try to do is say, that looks really exciting. What part of that technology is available right now from a practical perspective? And so that way, even the things that are overhyped, you can usually manage to find something where the technology is coming out of it that really does have that specific vertical, and you can really take advantage of it.
Excellent. Okay, now I'll jump back in. Thank you, Kenny. And thank you all for that great discussion. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to give each of you a quick 30 seconds or so for some self-promotion, whether you want to mention your solution, your personal website, social media, whatever you'd like. The floor is yours. Kenny, Since you moderated, we'll come to you last. So we'll start with Arjun.
Yeah, so thank you everybody for listening in. Hope the discussion was enlightening for you. Industrial ML is a company that I think most valuably offers real-time communication solutions of the type of information that data acquisition in factories provides to operators in factories. You're welcome to visit our website at industrialml.com or email us at info@industrialml.com. I'm happy to tell you more.
Thank you very much. Alexis.
Yeah. So as well, I want to thank everyone for listening. Hope you had a great time on our site. So at Capto, we build robots and based on open source technologies. I know we talked a lot about automation, and this can be super difficult to take a hand on at the first. So I'm really active on LinkedIn. Don't hesitate to connect and ask any question. We're always happy to talk about automation. Don't hesitate.
Thank you. Edmund.
Hey, I just want to say thanks to the panelists. It's been a great discussion, and to Kenny for moderating. Orchestro is the leading predictive procurement orchestration platform, primarily serving a large enterprise customer that has many different categories of managed spend and is looking to improve the influence, the impact of that influence, and of course, deliver value to the business in a repeatable, faster manner. You can find us on the web at orchestro.com, and we're recently been recognized by Gartner as a cool vendor and by Spend Matters, one of the leading analysts in the space, as a market-leading solution. So thanks so much for the great conversation.
Thank you. Sasha.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Really appreciate the discussion. So Now Vertical, we are a global data and analytics services and technology company. We've got a federated model that enables organizations in different industries to maximize the impact and utilization of their data and technology assets. For us, what we try to say and what we try to talk about is that somebody's trying to tell you that the bank is the same as the automotive company, that's the same as a retailer. They're trying to sell you a one-size-fits-all technology solution that you're going to get very little utilization from. So think about the verticals in which you operate in and how to make your organization become a bit more vertically intelligent. And we're here to try to help. Nowvertical.com, I think we got all the socials and stuff like that. And got a unique last name, so if you can remember it, feel free to hit me up on one of those channels.
Excellent. Thank you.
At Connexium, what we do is we solve the specific problem for manufacturers and distributors to help them automate their B2B transactions, whether it's sales order automation or on the accounts payable side. And you can find us at www.connexium.com and reach out to me on LinkedIn. Appreciate the time.
Thank you very much for yours. And Kenny, to wrap things up.
Thanks, Jonathan. It was so good spending the time with all of you guys today. It's I tell you, it's such a big topic. We can't even begin to scratch the surface in an hour, but it was really neat to get the perspective of a few different people from different sides of the business. So Paragon Films, which is where I work, is a stretch film manufacturer, not a movie company. We make plastic stretch film, which is kind of like cling wrap for boxes on pallets for shipping. So we're in the packaging industry. We make the best stretch film on the market. And then also I have, I'm an analyst for Acceleration Economy. You can go to accelerationeconomy.com. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with me or follow on LinkedIn. I usually try to post links to my articles and blogs and videos where I dive into these same sort of topics that we've been covering today, not always from a perspective of my own expertise, but often it's just something that I'm interested in and I want to get other people's perspective and learn more about it.
Well, excellent. Thank you again, all of you, for your time and your expertise this afternoon. It's much appreciated. But that will do it for this topic. If you're watching live, please stick around. We'll be right back with our next group of experts to discuss how to build a process automation tech stack. For Solutions Review, my name is Jonathan Paula. Thank you again to our panelists, and thank you for watching. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.